Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy on from Glitchy Thumbs. We're making characters, we're making games the glitchy way, my way. And in today's episode, we're going to be bringing character 3.6, Goggles the Boy, into Buildbox and creating a mechanic or just laying out the animations to see what animations I created for this character. If you haven't already, definitely check out the last video on the creation of this character in Blender and the entire process on how I created a 3D model and also the process on UV Unwrap, texture paint, and then bringing this into Mixamo to make our rigging process and animation so much faster, so much more streamlined. So definitely check out that video. Let me know what you think. And also check out all the previous characters that I worked on. But we're going to be bringing this character in Buildbox. So let's get to the video. So we open up Buildbox, create new game, click 3D game, start with a blank template as always, drop in the FBX for character 3.6. And this one's going to have the animations, and I forgot to highlight these separate objects before exporting. So that's why when you drag it into Buildbox, you might get this empty space with no character. And this has happened to me multiple times, and I've never figured out why, but I figured it out. To fix this for character 3.6, you gotta go back in Blender in object mode. You gotta highlight everything by pressing A. And if everything is orange, it should mean that everything's highlighted. And then you export the FBX again. Click export. This one's gonna overwrite the same file with the same file name, so we don't have to worry about that. Go back to Buildbox, delete this, drag this back in, click import, and you can see that we don't have the character again. That's because if you noticed that it wasn't highlighted when I exported it again, you can see when we go back to Blender, it's not highlighted, so it's not orange, which means your 3D model isn't selected and its armature isn't selected. So when you export, there's going to be nothing in your FBX file because nothing was selected. And if you want to be sure that you selected everything, expand your rig so that you can see your armature along with the body and the outline that you created. And then in the scene, press A, and you'll notice that everything is highlighted in orange. And also on the right side, you can see the rig and the body and the outline is highlighted. So that's what you should be checking before you export your FBX. And I think a better way to confirm this is to go to pose mode and then select everything to make sure that your animations are also showing. But it's probably better to do it in object mode, but everything should be selected. So I'm still trying to figure out the best way to export this. It might just be object mode, select everything, and then you're able to export, or it could be pose mode, select everything, and then export. So that's what I'm trying here. So I go to File, Export, FBX. And you can see, like I mentioned in the last video before I exported, if you expand Bake Animation, you can see I have all actions checked. If you want to export one action at a time so that you have an idle animation and a separate running animation that we have for character 3.6, then you would uncheck all actions and then just rename the idle animation right here with character 3_6_ idle animation. And that way you'll have your keyframe animation separate to use in Buildbox. That's how you would do it to keep everything organized. I didn't realize that I had the all actions checked. So that's why the names get a little confusing when you have a whole bunch of animations, because all your animations are bunched in to this FBX file, and this FBX file has this one name of character 3_6 animated for BB, and it's going to be the name for both keyframe animations. So that's why it becomes confusing later on when you bring it into Buildbox. That's how you would separate it. But that's going to be more clearly explained in another video when I have the content. I just didn't figure it out during this time in the video, so I'm just explaining it ahead of time so that I remember to talk about it. So now we'll go back to Buildbox, drop this back in, and since our character was highlighted correctly in Blender, everything seems to be working. We can see our character now. You can double click the character and you can see all the keyframe animations are in here. And this includes keyframe animations that we did for our previous characters. And it has the same name for all of them because that's what we exported it as in FBX from Blender. So that's why it's confusing. So if you were doing that for all your characters, having all actions checked, you're going to have to click play to see what animation is which. And this one doesn't seem like the idle animation, but we could use this animation for our character if we wanted to for something different, but that one doesn't work for our character. So that's the one we delete. And then this one we connect it to play, click restart and see what this animation does. This actually looks pretty cool. Kind of like he's playing some sort of record as a DJ, at least that's what I imagine. So that can actually be a pretty cool animation if I created some sort of music game where he's spinning some sort of record, or he's just in the back spinning some record and using that animation. I didn't even know I had that animation, and that probably came from a previous character, but we applied it with this rig, and it seems to work. So you could just reuse a lot of your animations to see what they do, and this is actually pretty cool. I didn't realize that there was an animation like this. Maybe we'll use this for this character. It actually works because he's some sort of retro type character, and that'd be pretty cool actually. And then the animation stops because it's not being looped. So we just need to check looped for it to work. And I'm testing the next animation, which should be the idle animation. And yes, this is the idle animation. So this is correct. This is what we want. It's going to be the last two. That's how you would have to do it if you didn't label everything correctly. And labeling it here can help, but when you click on the drop down menu, it's still going to be confusing. So it's better to export it correctly in Blender before you actually import it into Buildbox. And the first animation I named it as bounce animation, which is interesting. So it's cool that I saved that. I probably need to go back and export it to a different FBX so that I can keep that animation. It's actually pretty cool for character 3.6, Goggles the Boy. It could actually be Goggles the DJ. You see, this is how my mind works, I guess. When I'm watching things and narrating, different ideas come to me, and then I formulate some sort of story to go along with my characters. So Goggles the DJ can actually be a really good character name and also a character story because it works really well for this character. And it took me some time to get to that name because the naming of the character actually happened as I was creating the character in Blender. When I'm narrating, I'm actually just talking about my thoughts. And now we got to Goggles the DJ. And that name actually works really well. It's kind of catchy if you think about it. Goggles the DJ. I like that. And then let's edit the subscene. Uncheck receive shadow for both. Change the outline from white to black. That way we get our outline, and this definitely works. I don't run into any more outline issues because I know how everything kind of works in that process. Took me a few times to get it right, but now it's just being streamlined and we know what to do. So I click play and you see our idle animation plays for character 3.6, Goggles the DJ. Looks pretty cool. I actually really like this happy idle animation that I chose. See, it really matters what animations you actually choose from Mixamo. I feel like it has to fit your character. You can't just randomly pick one. You can, but the feel of it doesn't really work if it doesn't fit the character. At least that's how it is for me. It has to mesh really well for me to actually move forward in the process. I guess I'm selective like that in things that I choose. That's why everything has to be in a flow, because then I know that I chose things from my gut and that it's correct instead of rushing into everything. It was all part of the creative process of getting to this point. So that's how I kind of do things. And you can definitely see that if you've been watching my videos from the beginning, that none of this was actually written down. Everything was part of going with the flow, and the idea just kind of creates itself as you're going through the process. At least that's how I do things. I know everyone's do things a little bit different, but that's how I've been doing it for a very long time. A lot of my game ideas and a lot of my characters that I come up with, it all started with some sort of concept and I had a thought about it, and then as a few days or a few weeks pass, the idea just starts to formulate itself as if my subconscious is creating that for me. So the idle animation looks pretty good. Let's see the running animation. And this is how I decided to label it so that I can easily determine what the animation was. You can see I had to get to this point to start thinking about, okay, how can I resolve that problem? The keyframe animations are incorrectly labeled, but it had to take some time for me to start thinking about labeling it. And I only look for solutions whenever that problem happens to me over and over again. I don't try to find solutions for things that I'm not dealing with. It doesn't make sense to do that because I won't be able to use it. It has to be something that I keep running into as an issue or as a problem, and I'll find a solution to fix it because that just makes more sense to me. And for this duplicate character, this one has the running animation. That way we can have our character side by side and we can see the two cool animations we decided to choose for character 3.6, Goggles the DJ. And this is something I've been doing for my characters as of recently in the videos, since we have a lot of animations that we've been adding to the characters. And so far it's the idle animation and the run animation, which is what I was thinking about for my characters. We had to have a way to have a video with those animations so that I have that at my disposal. If I ever wanted to return to this character, I'll know that these are the animations. And I should actually make another video because we actually ran into that bounce animation that works really well for a DJ feel. So that would probably be a third animation that I should have included in this video, but I was very focused on getting the idle animation and the run animation at the time. So let's click the ground, change it to no texture. And if you selected this, it will have no texture on the floor. It'll just be a solid color, and we can just select a color that works well for this character. Since our character is Grayscale, I like to stick to Grayscale because it keeps everything simplified. And in the preview, it's still going to preview the grass color, so you're going to need to reset that. I click restart, so that way we have our gray color for the background, and that's probably a little bit too dark, so make that a little bit lighter. Click restart. That works really well for character 3.6. Goggles DJ. Let's click the 3D world so that we can get the background color to be something lighter, and a white, probably way too bright. Choose lighter gray. So we want some sort of a contrast from the character to the background to the ground. And you gotta be very creative using gray colors or grayscale to try to get that contrast. That's why I focus on grayscale first, because if you understand how shading and contrasting with grayscale colors like gray, black and white works, then you'll definitely understand that for colors when you add it in, because colors are pretty much just going to be the same thing, but just a different hue. And I decided to go with this type of theme. You can definitely tell which part is the sky and also the floor because of the colors. And also, since our character is a lighter gray, the focus is on the character. So that's something that I was pretty much making sure I understand. Because if you're creating your own characters, you really need to understand it from the most basic, simplest version. Because if you can create a game with just gray colors, you can definitely create a game that's going to be all these type of different vibrant colors as well. I actually might create a game where it's just all grayscale, just because I guess it's my style in a sense. If you've been watching my videos, you notice that all my characters are black and white when they started out as a concept, and then I created the grayscale color palette, and I've just been using it. I just feel like I like it. It reminds me a lot of different mangas that I've read. It's always like a black and white color that they use, and they're just really good at shading the different characters with just the most simplest way of darkening on a piece of paper. So that's how my approach has been for my characters, to try to create the character without any thoughts of colors just yet. Because at this stage in the character development, I feel like I still don't know the colors just yet. It hasn't come to me as part of my creative process on what colors they should be, just because I haven't spent enough time with them to know what color they should be. Because this character can be any color, like I've been mentioning. If you watched the very first video with Ghost, which is character 1.1, you'll notice that I didn't know what color to use for that character. I started with a blue color, and then I just changed the hue in Buildbox. And even with that, I still don't know what the main color would be for that character. So that's still something that I don't want to say struggle with, but for me, the character and the color of it has to come at a later point in the character development. It has to be something that works really well with the character and also the type of environment that I plan to put them in. A lot of that stuff won't happen until later on in the process. And again, we're still in the beginning. This is the prototyping the character, and prototypes can just be simple. And this is my version of prototyping a character in Buildbox. And the next thing we always do after setting up the animations is add the if collide. That way it has some collisions around the character. If we want to have it collide with things, we can. And I do this early in the beginning because when you set the physics to dynamic for this character, you can adjust the collision shape for both the start and the if collide that you just added. Makes a lot more sense to do it together in the beginning. Otherwise, you're gonna have to do that at the same time later on, which is not efficient. And I like to find things that are efficient. And I definitely messed up here. I should have just did the collision first before duplicating the character. That way, we already have the collisions set up for one character and we won't have to do the other one. But it looks like I'm gonna have to do it for both characters, even though they share the same collision. So that's something you need to think about. If you're duplicating your character, make sure you have your collision shapes already set up before you think about duplicating it. And again, it hasn't happened to me multiple times just yet. That's why I didn't notice it. But now I'm watching the video. I'm like, okay, there's going to be a time when I actually do this, because that was a problem and you're running into it a lot of times. So you're going to need to find a solution. And the solution is to do it first before duplicating the character. So pretty much do everything with one character first, have it all set up, the animations, the collision shapes, any type of nodes, that you want in that character. And then when that character is already built and ready, you can just duplicate the character and not have to worry about anything else. But I'm setting up the collision shape here just by dragging this down with the tool. Now I always start with the cube shape just because it's easy. There's 4 sides. You just got to make sure that it's close as possible to the body of the character, because this is what is going to be colliding into separate objects. And I did it for one version of the character first. And then since we already did the collision shape for the if collide, we can also copy this and paste it into the duplicate character and connect that. But you can see what I mean by the start and the if collide. Even though we copied and pasted the if collide over, the if collide is correct. We have that collision shaped, but the start is still that huge cube shape. So we have to always align this separately. And I'd rather just do things at the same time. Just makes life much easier. Of course, these collisions can be different because they're colliding with different things at different times of your game. But I like to have this set up in the beginning because I always use the dynamic physics for my character. And the only other fast way to do it is to compare the values from the if collide and then either copy and paste it or just quickly remember the values for all 3 and then just type them in for the X, Y, and Z axis. And then you have your collision shapes for your characters. And then you want to save the Buildbox project. You did a lot of work. You don't want this to crash, and then you have to end up redoing this. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it surely happens sometimes. And this one's going to be character 3.6, and I just go to the previous character's name, select the 3_5, change the 5 to a 6, and you click play, and we just set up the animations for character 3.6. Goggles, the DJ, the idle animations on the left, running animations on the right side. And that's perfect for our animation setup so far for this character. And we're going to need to export this. So go to File, Project Settings, enter your bundle ID. It's going to be the same bundle ID for me. And then the name on the device, I put character 3.6. Click OK. Export, iOS. Continue export this into your folder, open the Xcode project. In Xcode, signing in capabilities, select your team, increment the bundle ID. Again, you don't have to do it this way. This is just how I do it. And then click play and make sure your device is connected to the computer. That way you can run it to your device. And sometimes it has this iPhone is busy, fetch debug symbols message. And it takes some time. What I normally do is I either just leave it alone and let it do its thing, or I just click cancel and then unplug my phone and then replug it in again and press play. Sometimes you just have to do that, and then eventually it'll run to your device. And then from here you can grab the screen recording of your animations for your character. So for my character, these are the animations that I decided to use for character 3.6. Goggles, the DJ, he's running on the right side. And that's the run animation that I chose from Mixamo. And then on the left side is the idle animation. And this is also from Mixamo. And then I have this video that I can look at on my device at any time. And we can decide what we want to do with this character because we know these are the animations we have. And that's just a reference point for me. And since I set up the animations for character 3.6, I was getting to a point where I was thinking, okay, now we have some sort of process where the first thing I do in Buildbox would be to set up the scene, set up the animations, just so I know what animations I have in my character. But also I would try to create a mechanic as well. So that's the one thing I've been trying to do, where I force myself or attempt to try something new that I've been doing for each character. And setting up the animations take time, but that doesn't really get us to our end goal, which is eventually to get to a full game. So you still have to practice on creating a mechanic. And that's what I've been doing with my characters. And this would be the mechanic that I thought of at the moment. So with the same file, since this is all set up already, what I'm going to do is save a new Buildbox file. And this one's going to be with a different extension. This one I put platform at the time. Then I changed it to Open Runner. So in this Buildbox project, we can just have a single character because that's the one we're going to add the controls to. I renamed this one to character 3_6. So I know this one's the one I've been working on. Click into the character. For this character, we're going to add a brain box, add the animated platformer, and then add the mobile controls. Under run UI button, change it to none. Under jump UI button, change it to none. And then for the event name, add J0 because that's going to be the same event name that we're going to use for the receive and send. And then click into the character. You can see our nodes are all set up correctly. And we know how this system works because in the previous characters, I learned that. So I'm pretty much just repeating the entire process again, but making sure I understand it from start to finish. So in the subscene, we select our character, and it's going to be confusing if your character has the same name and you dragged in your character multiple times. So that's why I always start with a fresh Buildbox project, because then you'll just have one character in this list, so it's not as confusing. During this time, I didn't export the character correctly. That's why we have this issue. But I know it's going to be probably the character at the end, so that's one I selected for the subscene. And for the idle animation, this list looks confusing because it is. It's usually going to be the last two animations, but just to point it out, even if you delete that duplicate character like I'm doing here, doesn't really help with the animation list. That animation list just kind of stays the same. There's an option to remove all this in the most latest Buildbox version, but during this time in the video, that's what I was struggling with. But we know it's going to be the last two animations normally. So for the idle animation, it's the second to last animation. And then for the walk, which is the same thing as run to me, is the last animation in the list. And I also do it for the run animation, selecting the last one on the list as well. And how I had it set up during this time was I was using UI joystick move. So that's why I'm dragging this node in, and I would uncheck the receive joystick node to the mobile controller, then add a UI screen and add the dynamic joystick that I have on the UI screen. Press play, and let's move this joystick around to see what happens. So the character moves around, but the animations don't play correctly with the direction. That's because we didn't connect anything to the UI joystick move just yet. So the joystick moves, but there's no animation because nothing's connected just yet. And I delete the old subscene and these keyframe animations because we don't need it anymore. The keyframe animations are already in Buildbox, so we just need to keep everything simplified and organized. That's why I deleted that. And then press play, move it around. Next thing we need to do is connect the idle and move to their correct keyframe animation. And I think I wanted to try using the receive joystick because we were able to use it in the Adventure Run platformer without any issues. So I wanted to give that a try again. It doesn't seem to be working correctly. And again, if you have the UI joystick move and the receive joystick node in at the same time, one of them is going to be working over the other. Be sure to test them separately, actually. Otherwise, you might be thinking that one of the nodes isn't working. And for the UI joystick move, I connected the idle to play on the idle animation, keyframe animation. And then for the move, I connected it to the run animation for the keyframe animation. Press play. And you can see it kind of works. The animations are a little bit weird when you're using the UI joystick move for some reason. It's probably because I didn't connect the opposite to stop for each of the animations. So the animations kind of play weird, but that's just how it is. And I like to test things. I unhook the move and press play just to see what happens when I move around. I'm moving around, the idle animation is still playing, which is interesting. So when I connect the move to the run of the advanced 3D movements, I wanted to see if it will play that animation, and nothing really happens. So connecting that doesn't really do anything. This is how I tend to test things, just connect things to see what happens. If things happen correctly, then great. If it doesn't, we'll just try something else. So this time I'm connecting it to the running portion of the advanced control system. That doesn't seem to be doing anything either. So I connected to the walk animation. The walk animation is the same thing as the run animation. At least that's what I chose the option. And this actually seems to work correctly. When I move the joystick, it runs around, and when I let go, it reverts back to the idle animation. It's opposite because using the UI joystick move makes it run in the opposite direction, I guess. So we just need to switch our character to a different rotation, and it should fix everything. That's what we did for our character the last time. So I put 180 for the rotation. That way the character is faced the opposite side of our joystick moves, and that should fix the joystick issue. So when we move to the right, it should run to the right. When we move to the left, it should run to the left, and then when we move around, it should follow our joystick movements. This works really well, actually. I like it. I like the idle animation. I like the switching between the idle and run animation. But what does bother me is the character is facing the opposite direction. So when you start the game, the character is backward. That actually might have to do with how I exported in Blender. I think that's what the Z forward option is when I always switch it from negative Z forward to positive Z forward. So I got to try that. That's what I'm thinking about right now. But that's okay. This works with the joystick. This setup is different than the one in the adventure run template. So I move my character to your characters, and when you do that, you have more control over what happens with the camera and your character. So I click into the camera, go to position follow, character, press play. So whenever we run around, the camera should be following our character. We can't really tell because there's nothing else on the screen to tell if the camera is even following. And using the setup this way, the deform between the idle animation and run animation is a little bit weird. That's why you see the arm glitch in this way, but it's okay. You know, we're making games the glitchy way. That's why I like that tagline that I came up with. Just because we're going to go through creating a bunch of game mechanics, and it's just going to be, in the process, things are going to be super glitchy, but I like it. It's part of my brand. It's all part of the process. And even if we release things like this, it's okay because this is part of the glitchy verse. And I don't know what I'm doing here, but I duplicated the start scene, changed this to 1. I'm adding a cube to the scene, scale this down so we have a smaller cube, press play, and you can see everything is a little bit weird with this big cube. I forgot to delete that duplicate character on the first scene, because if we have a duplicate character in the first scene, it'll just duplicate our character multiple times. So the character is on the start scene and the cube is on the first scene, but I don't see the cube, so I just added the cube back to the start scene. And now when we move around with our joystick, you can see there's a bunch of cubes that are already spawned because this level is being spawned an infinite amount of times. And that's how you can tell the camera is working with the camera follow. And on the first scene, I just moved the cube in the middle, duplicate the first scene to create a second scene, move the cube to the left, press play. I accidentally pressed the Buildbox World button. And if you click that button, you can share this to the Buildbox World app, and you can test things super quickly doing it that way as well. But I like to test it the manual way with Xcode just because I'm more familiar with that. But you can do it both ways, whatever way works for you. If you don't have an Apple developer account, most likely you'll have to use the Buildbox World option to test your mechanics. I guess that would be more seamless actually using that way. So I press play. We have character 3.6, Goggles the DJ, running around with a bunch of cubes that are being spawned on the scene. Click the camera toggle to adjust our view because this is probably a little bit too close for the character. We want it to be somewhat at a distance to see all the cubes when we run around. Then we'll just click restart again. Try to get this at a good angle where it's like a top-down view of our character, but also we're able to visually see all the cubes. So it's like a open runner. That's why the file name is open runner. For the camera, if you wanted to save this camera view, definitely try to simplify the values so that you can copy this into a spreadsheet. And then for the joystick, I'm just running around and I'm just testing this mechanic by moving the joystick around and then letting go to see what happens with the idle animation. And I can collide with these cubes because they're both dynamic. They both have collision shapes, and I can collide and move them around. And we know in the adventure run template, there was a box that we moved around. So it's similar to how the setup would be in this mechanic. These cubes would be boxes, and this could be some sort of puzzle that we would have to figure out by moving these boxes around. So that's the simplest way to think about that setup. And I duplicate the second scene to create a third scene. And this one, I'm going to move the cube all the way to the right. That way we have some variation on how the cubes are being spawned. And you can see when we press play, as we move forward, you notice that the cubes are spawning for us. It's randomly spawning a different scene between 1, 2, and 3. So that's why you see the cubes randomly just drop down. That's the cool thing about the randomization portion of Buildbox. It'll randomize our scenes, and that's how it's being shown. So I click into the cube, add a defeat node, and add a debris explosion. And we're going to need an asset to use for the debris. So I duplicate the cube, name this to debris, and we have to delete the debris explosion and defeat node and the if collide node in the debris, and then click edit for the asset and select debris. And I actually don't want it to be a cube. I want it to be a sphere. So click edit for the mesh and select the sphere. That way the debris is different than the actual cube. Change the collision shape to sphere and then press play. And when we start, the cube hits the floor and it just shatters into a bunch of spheres. This looks pretty cool. It's like we're in a room full of those balls, like a jungle gym of balls. Kind of remember that as a kid, playing in those playgrounds at like Chuck E. Cheese. and they have a bunch of colorful balls that you can jump in. That's what it reminds me of. I used to do that as a kid, so it was actually pretty fun. We can actually recreate that feeling in a game. So that's actually something that I would probably think of for a scene, possibly be a obstacle course that we would have to go through all these different colorful balls and get through the end of the level. So that could possibly work for character 3.6. Goggles the DJ. He could be a character getting to the end of the level, going through different obstacle courses. That's just an idea that came to my mind. So maybe we come back and rebuild that. So since we don't want the cube to shatter right away, we have to go to if collide, change this to the character only. So whenever the character touches the cube, then it will get defeated, and then the debris explosion will happen with the spheres. So I move the joystick, character runs into the cube, and nothing happens. Why is that? That's a little bit weird. That should have worked, but for the character, it didn't work because our collision shape is set to none, and you have to set it to character in order for Buildbox to know character 3.6 is a character. So click play. So let's run and try to run into these cubes. And when I run into the first cube, it shatters into a bunch of spheres. And these are the debris that I chose. I like how it stays on the screen and just rolls around. We can just run into all these different cubes. And that's pretty cool. But some of this we can always adjust with the minimum scale and the maximum scale to get it to make sense with the shape. So I changed the minimum scale to 0.05 and maximum scale to 0.1. Let's try that. So when I touch the cube, it shatters into very small balls. That's probably a little bit too small. It's entirely up to you. So just go with the flow, whatever feels good for your game. I'm changing the minimum scale to 0.1 now and the maximum scale to 0.2. This will probably be a better setting to better fit the sizing of the debris. And now this is what I'm talking about. Like, I just go with the flow and then see if it actually makes sense, and then we just go with that. And I guess I delete the first scene and also the second scene and also the third scene. I'm just going to put all the cubes in the start scene. And if you go into the top down view in your scene, you can actually see the grid, and it makes everything easier to set up your separate objects. And also go to view, turn on snap mode. So whenever you duplicate the cube, it'll snap on one of the points on the grid. And this way you can press W, A, S, and D to duplicate the cube as quick as possible on the scene. So if you want to duplicate up, press W. If you want to duplicate left, press A. If you want to duplicate down, press S. If you want to duplicate right, press D. So that's how I quickly set up this scene. And we're basically creating a square around our character with all these cubes. So when we hit start, cube's going to fall and create a square shape around our character. And when I run into it, it will shatter into a bunch of different spheres. And this can be some sort of a collision game where we have to destroy all the things on the screen so we can have some sort of box. And when we hit it, it will reveal something. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. So we could just have a hidden objects type puzzle game where we have to find things. But yeah, this is the mechanic I decided to come up with. So I go to export. We want to get this to the device. Since we already have everything set up in the project settings, I don't have to set that up. I can just go straight to exporting this for iOS. Save this, go to the Xcode project, use the same bundle ID with the increment value, press play. This is a screen recording from my device that I took. Character 3.6, Goggles the DJ, starts off with the idle animation, and then we move around with the joystick to destroy these cubes, and it will split into these different spheres. And we could possibly make this into a hidden objects type of game or a puzzle game where we have to figure out what object we need on the level by destroying cubes or different objects to find it. So that's another idea that we can do for this. And I just like the animation on how the spheres just roll around, so that changes the atmosphere in a little bit. We could have this in a water setting where the sphere becomes bubbles. So it just really depends. Like I said, I have various ideas as I watch things, and I have no idea which way I'm going to take this. I just record my ideas, and whichever one sounds the best, I could possibly go back and expand upon it. So that's the screen recording I have for the mechanic idea during this time of the video. I have various ideas that I can possibly build with this character now, and I went back into Blender. I have no idea why. But yeah, that concludes this video for character 3.6, Goggles the DJ. This was the mechanic I came up with in Buildbox. It's simple, but it works. It was something that I added on top of my character for the animations that we already did. And we're getting to a point where I'm utilizing the joystick mechanic a lot more, which is good. I definitely like that mechanic. You have more free form use because of the ability to move around the space, where we can utilize our 3D model much more and show all the things that we've been doing with the animations. Let me know what you think about the entire process. Let me know if you think about this character. And this completes character set number 3. So I'm excited to finish this video, and also we get to start the new character set in the next video. So don't miss that. I'm sure you've been having a lot of fun watching all my characters. So please like and subscribe. It helps my channel, and also it helps me keep doing what I'm doing. And don't miss character set number 4 videos for those type of characters and what I came up with, because you don't want to miss that. And you know what? We're always making characters. We're always making games the glitchy way, my way. So see you next video. And I don't know why I'm picking my ear, but I am picking it. So peace out.